Ready? You ready? Are you ready? You meet in a tavern. You ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? You meet in a tavern.
Welcome to Tavern Stories. I'm Kitty the Wolf, your hostess in the show, where we roll some dice and talk about the stories we enjoy, the stories we're a part of, and the stories that are a part of us. And if you'd like to join us in the tavern during a live recording, you can grab a table at our Discord room. It'll be in the show notes, so it should be in the show notes now, and you should be able to. Oh, thank you. Should be able
Camera
to.
one.
First time, y'all. Should be able to find us on YouTube after the live recording or any podcast platforms that you get your podcasts from, both in audio and in video. And you'll be able to find us on Linktree, Linktree/Tavern Stories Podcast. That'll have all the places you can find us. That'll be on Twitch, Instagram for the behind the scenes pictures and videos. And if you want to join us on the Discord channel, basically grab a table in the tavern. That's what's showing behind me. We'll be able to see you, or we may be able to ignore you. One of the two is going to happen. But we'll also be able to do giveaways in the tavern. So if you want to hop on over to Patreon, Patreon is the front door into the tavern. Become a patron for $4, or become a patron plus for $8. The difference between the two is that you'll be able to see bonus episodes and be a part of Q&As when we announce that we have some additional guests who will actually pay attention to you in the room. So,
Hey, I'll tell you what, if you're on the room, I can see it, and I'll pay attention. Now, you might get some shit from me, but I'll pay attention to you. Question on the Patreon.
Sure.
Is the $4, is that for the entire season? Is that like $4 per episode? What's the deal there?
It's $4 a month. And yes, this is a season. So starting today and through the end of December would be considered a season. We'll be doing this weekly. It'll be Saturday and or Sunday, depending on the availability of guests, or if I'm not available because I'm doing something like running the Tough Mudder next month or going to PAX Unplugged in December.
So since we're in the middle of September, $4, if they join today, would that cover October also?
If they join, I think it's $4 as of the time that you join.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, so $4 for a month to come in and flick shit at the guest, which today is me. Woohoo! So there you go.
So speaking of which, I've already made my introduction. Say as much as you want to about you, but I'll also ask some questions before we get started.
This should be fun. So my name is Greg Suchanek. I am half of G&K Group, which is the sponsor. My wife is the bar wench tonight, and she is the one handling the chat there in Discord when you decide to join via Patreon. So don't flick me the crap. Don't flick her the crap, or she'll cut you off, just like a good bar wench would. We have a real estate business, and you can go to gkgroupva.com and learn a little bit more about us. And of course, you'll be, I guess, learning a little bit more about me. Me and Kitty the Wolf here actually work together. So we've known each other for, I guess, a year and a half or so.
Actually, for a little bit longer. We kind of were in passing back
That's
in,
true. That's true.
I don't know, over a decade ago or something like that.
You got stuck. Well, I've certainly known your husband for a long time,
Mhm.
and you got stuck with me as a super
For a manager.
Yeah, something like
For team
that.
lead. Something.
Come on, supervisor. Mwah, come on. See, they missed that. Okay, now I can see the screen on what I'm seeing. Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah. All right. So, a couple of things I was going to refresh my memory on about you is what kind of stories are you currently involved in? Are you reading any books, watching any movies or shows? Are you playing any games? Are you running any games?
I haven't run a game since I was like 17. So we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons or any kind of role playing game. I've been part of when I was a lieutenant in Panama. Not one of my sergeants, one of the sergeants in one of the other platoons actually made up a game, and so we were part of that. That was awesome. That was really the last big role playing thing. And then we are watching The Expanse right now on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
We're on season 3. I've seen the whole thing before. This is Karen's first time watching it through. It's good. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Amazon Prime. You're getting a free plug here. If you're a fan of the new Battlestar or any of those, then it's different, but it's similar. It's fairly realistic. There is very little suspension of disbelief.
How well do you think it is written? How's it connecting with you?
I think it's pretty good. That's why I'm willing to watch it again.
Okay.
So if it was crap, I wouldn't watch it again, and I wouldn't suggest it to others. It's got the two power struggle with the third power outside trying to be part of it,
mm-hmm.
kind of thing. Similar to what you see in the world, really. So you've got great power competition thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the redheaded stepchild and the Belters trying to be part of the conversation.
The Belters,
the asteroid belt. You've never seen?
No.
Oh well, see, so
disadvantage
here.
Don't worry. By the way, for people who are wondering how this is all going to pan out, there probably, and we'll try to avoid it, but there probably will be spoilers for some shows or some books or some games. But we're not trying to maliciously do that. So we're definitely trying to talk about stories, and this is in such a way as somebody would recommend a story to you. Why would you care about this story? So
just like we do when we're sitting around, if we're chatting about this kind of stuff in a group from work, then we will first we'll find out if anybody hasn't seen it, and so we'll assume here that anybody watching may not have seen it. So we'll try not to do the spoilers, obviously, and give away key parts, but it is something that you'll want to see.
Okay.
The two power or the great power competition, that's no spoiler. The idea that there's a third party, the asteroid belt, the people who grew up in the asteroid belt, that's not any kind of spoiler or anything like that. The fact that they want a seat at the table, well, that's human nature.
Yeah.
So no spoilers there. If I was to tell you that the proto-molecule was such and such, that might be a spoiler. So I'm not going to do that.
Is it highbrow or lowbrow entertainment?
Could be both.
Okay.
It can make you think, certainly. It's got scientific aspects, but if you're just in it for fun, you're just in it for fun. That's all right. Kind of like most good TV shows. You can watch it at any level.
Well, most. Some. I don't know. It kind of depends on what kind of audience you are.
Well, but that's what I mean. A good TV show will have you can follow along and it's just funny, and then it's funnier if it's got references to things where you have to be well read, or if you're scientifically inclined, or if you are current in literature or anything like that. There are references that make it funnier for good TV shows. Smart writing, I guess you'd say, that don't force it. Big Bang Theory was like that. Most of the really good cartoons are like that. They're funny.
Yeah.
Physical humor's always funny. But when they make references to things, it's funnier if you get the reference.
So I've been watching I've been watching a couple of shows recently, but Strange New Worlds I just finished the second season of, and it actually melds with its cartoon counterpart, Star Wars or Star Trek. I know you're more of a Star Wars person, but you still speak Star Trek. There's a there are a couple of characters. I'm not going to spoil this, but they do kind of a meld of the characters from the live action Strange New Worlds universe and the universe from their cartoon counterpart. And they try to do everything right down to how fast and how loud and how big the speaking and actions are and how ridiculous the humor is.
How
and
over the top Star Trek is in general.
absolutely. So they bring that into the episode, which is
Now, is the cartoon version, is that
it's I
Lower
think it's
Decks? Is
yes.
that the one
Yeah,
we're
that's the
talking about,
one.
where it has like Boromir is not Boromir,
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings, but it starts with a B. As an ensign that is kind of haphazard, and then you've got the one female ensign that's trying to be on command track but gets off track.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And I know all this because of a video. I haven't watched any of them, but I know some of the background because of the Star Trek fleet commands on the phone that I played for a couple of years up until they decided to go really woke. And anyway, I dropped it because I'm not going to deal with that. So
The humor in Strange New Worlds, I feel like would be right up your alley.
oh, I'm sure it would be.
Yeah, it's outstanding. Really, really
That's
great
Strange
storytelling.
New Worlds
all the way
is
through.
the live action
Yes,
with Captain Pike.
yes, that's the.
It's pre-Kirk, right?
It's pre-Kirk, except Kirk is still in Strange New Worlds. He's just not yet the captain for the
Now,
Enterprise.
is he assigned to the Enterprise, or is he assigned to a different show and just makes appearances?
He's assigned to a different ship, but his brother is
Okay.
on the Enterprise.
Cool.
So you hear about Kirk through
And
his
Spock,
brother.
Spock is still like the scientific officer on the ship.
Yes.
And Uhura's on the ship,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
The only one they don't have, as I recall, is Bones.
Bones is not there yet.
'Cause
Correct.
He comes with, I think he comes in the storyline. I think he comes with Kirk, but I don't remember if he's on the. I don't remember if he's on the pilot for the original Star Trek or not.
If I go by what the J.J. Abrams version or movies tell me, it's always been Kirk and Bones.
If you missed that was an eye roll.
So yes, those two are a pair. They come together because right now on the Enterprise, in Pike's crew, there's Nurse Chapel, there's Mbenga as the two in the infirmary. I'm trying to think of who else. Number one is she's
Number one or number two? I thought number one was the captain.
sorry, number two. You're right.
Yeah. So, shit.
Yeah. I think why the reason why I got that wrong is because her name I think is Una.
Which of course means
Is one.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's classic.
So,
I think dose would be too obvious, right?
but it's
Or, duh.
yeah. It's definitely worth the watch. The writing and the conflicts that they throw them into.
Yeah,
are
except
good.
that it's on Paramount and that's another $20 a month.
Well, I know how you
Cheap,
roll.
Come on.
I know how you roll. If you got to pay for it, you got to be really talked into it.
That's
Yeah.
yes.
What? How do you watch? What do you watch your stuff on?
Amazon Prime.
What's that life
Well,
like?
and I got hacked into Disney, which now has a Hulu bundle with it.
Okay.
So Hulu and Disney, and that's really only for Marvel and Star Wars.
Okay.
Because Mandalorian is awesome. Ahsoka, not so much. So many problems with Ahsoka.
Are you in that where to begin camp?
Oh yeah. Well, so no. The problem is it didn't begin. It was. You've got go to YouTube and look it up because it's there. But I have a hard. They could have done so much with the character. They could have done so much putting it in the right place in the timeline, and they tried to squeeze it in where it doesn't belong. And that's right in the middle of the right at the end of episode 6. and I'm sorry, it begs the question: how did Luke not ever meet her? How did she not ever link up with the guy who everybody knows, who happens to share the same last name as her master, who is looking for other frickin' Jedi? I have a hard time with that. When she showed up in Mandalorian, it worked because she was off on her own. She was off doing her own thing on a planet separate. Presumably, she had been there the whole time, not part of the rebellion. And she was in Rebels, which is the cartoon show leading up to Episode 4. It works because Luke hadn't been discovered yet, and she was naturally kind of doing her thing. But to say that she was part of this rebellion for 3 years, where he comes to prominence after destroying the first Death Star and becoming General Skywalker, and one of her best friends is the and for life of me I can't remember her name. The Twilight with the green things, the pilot. She's a general, and if she's a general in the rebellion, then she knows of Luke Skywalker. And she happens to have a best friend who is Ahsoka Tano, who is a ex-Jedi Knight as a spy, Fulcrum, within the rebellion. And one of her other friends is a partial Padawan for Ahsoka, and none of this word gets to Luke. I have a hard time with that. So I think that this is. I don't think they're thinking through what the second and third order thoughts are. They're trying to. They're not being truthful to the actual spirit.
They're
of the
not
story.
being consistent.
Yeah. So and the problem is by doctrine they're creating canon, and because anything in the movies is considered canon. The problem is which canon takes priority over what canon, right? So in the old method, the 4 or the 6 movies are canon, and then all the other videos are kind of secondary canon, if you will. But that's not the way Disney explained it. It's all canon, except that it doesn't work.
So we were talking about, I think it was like yesterday or the day before, about the hatchet method of watching the films, which, for those who don't know, if I recall correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, it was watch 4, 5, and then go back for a flashback and watch 2, 3.
Yep.
We're not going to do anything with 1 because
Skip
1 sucks.
Altogether. Yep.
And then we're going to say, okay, we got the flashback in context. We're going to go over to 6 for the redemption arc to get completed.
Yeah.
And then you have your thoughts about 7, 8, 9.
Oh, crap. But aside kind of a fun story, but quite honestly, it doesn't work. And there are entire videos on YouTube. There's no need to rehash it.
So someone was telling me that there's a lot of retconning in Star Wars anyways, because like what is canon?
What's
Retcon, when they're going back and ignoring prior written or prior filmed storyline and basically saying, forget that, we're basically sort of doing alternate timeline sort of stuff.
So that was true when it came to the books. And that's why they created that hierarchy of canon. And you had, now this is 15-year-old plus information. I think it was back before Lucasfilm was bought by Disney. Disney really is the root of all evil when it comes to this. So they...
I'm glad you're subscribing.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
I mean, clearly you would go to where the root of all evil is. So
yeah, well, you got to be able to see thine enemy, right? So it's kind of like having to use Microsoft products to do so. I know we're working off mostly Apple here, but when you have to use Microsoft, you're dealing with the devil's cabana boy.
I'm ambiguous. I sleep with both sides.
Yeah, there you go. So it used to be, like I said, if it was in the movies, that was the top tier. That was canon.
Yeah.
You didn't violate that.
Yeah.
And then you had a series of things under that went all the way down to, I think the next level was screenplays or
Mm-hmm.
any supporting material for the movies. And then you had officially sanctioned books and went all the way down to, like you said, the alternate timelines or
The let's forget that this movie happened.
Splinter in the
or,
Mind's Eye. Splinter
Yeah.
in the Mind's Eye is like bottom level, right? Because that was written between episode 4 and episode 5. It was written in like 1978 by Alan Dean Foster.
Yeah.
And it had Luke and Darth square off. I mean, shoot, the cover of the book has him over Leia protecting it, and this before we know that they're brother and sister. So there's a whole love triangle thing there that just doesn't work.
Yep.
So whatever. This is the suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
And some of them are just fun. Others are fun to watch to see how badly Disney can screw things up.
I have a lot of thoughts on Disney. Not all of them bad. There's a lot of negotiation that Disney can do with me in terms of, should I just allow them to have their flaws and know that I grew up with those flaws, and now that those flaws are being baked into other people's psyche, here we go. This is how our next generations are going to get molded. But there are also some shifts, and I think it's because the people that grew up and decided that they wanted something new out of Disney joined Disney and started making different kinds of stories. But
I don't think that's why that's happening personally. I think it's a different reason. I don't think they give a shit about the medium, but that's a whole separate conversation.
Business versus storytelling, those two spheres always knock heads. They don't knock boots, they knock heads.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then there are other factors in there. Don't spill the mead.
No, definitely not spilling the mead.
Let's do the plug for Good Times Mead there.
Well, he's not open for business yet, so
Well, yes.
We'll just say this is very good mead and we're having some good
Very
times.
good mead, and eventually it will be with Good Times Mead. So there you go.
I've got an agenda, and I know that I've told you about this from the very first day that I said, hey, we're going to do this podcast, and this thing is the idea. I've been dying to say these words, but before I get to those words, grab some dice. This is what we're basically doing. We are coming up with 3 stories we are obsessed with and 3 topics that we want to spin a little bit of stories
What
about.
size dice?
Mine are bigger than yours.
Well, yes.
So what we're going to do is we'll do 3-on-3 for the stories.
So D6.
D6. And I know I said 3, but because we've got already some conversations and some room, maybe, in time, we might be able to do 4 and 4 for the topics. Okay. So let's list out some stories that we're obsessed with, or that we know that whatever the conversation is, we can always figure out a way to bring it back to this and make a reference to this story. So we know the topic is closed when somebody drops a reference to the story that die lies on.
Okay.
All right. Stories. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Have at it. What you got? 3 from you, 3 from me.
Stories or what the top or what the closing? Which one are we doing first?
We'll do the stories. We'll do books, shows, movies, games, comics, whatever the.
I can do. I can bring something around to. I can bring something around to. Family Guy, American Dad.
Oh, geez. Yep. Yes, you certainly
do
can.
it to The Simpsons. I can do Futurama. I can do Rick and Morty. Obviously, you see a trend here with cartoons because cartoons are better than real life.
Well, here's the
Real-
challenge.
real life sucks.
Can you pick one?
No, I usually alternate. I usually attribute it to 2 or 3 different.
But to
ones.
consider the topic closed, it has to come back to one.
Well,
This is
that's
the
what dice is
challenge.
for.
Which one?
That's what the dice is for.
That is what the dice is for. So, like, if I do this, and you say Family Guy,
Yep.
then it doesn't matter if you dropped a Futurama
Yeah, no,
reference
it's
or not.
closed.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
So, your choice.
Any of those. Pick 3. I don't care.
You pick 3. I'm not picking for you.
All right, so we'll do different different producers. So we'll do Futurama, we'll do American Dad, and we'll do Rick and Morty,
Futurama,
which is Matt Groening,
American Dad,
which of course is what's his face?
and Rick and Morty.
Yep.
I am going to I will throw in, and of course, you can drop all the references from anything else that you want to during the conversation, but it doesn't close until
So
you
if
hit one of these guys.
So if you want to keep the what if you hit one of those? Does that still close it? So if you come up with a reference and I want to close it, and
Yeah.
I'm able to return it.
Yeah,
it
it's
doesn't
a
matter.
collaborative effort. It's
I
not
love it.
competitive.
All right.
Yeah. But this also means that it's more collaborative. It's easier. It's more easily collaborative if we both know the story that we're talking about. So, for instance, if I say Witcher and you're not a Netflix guy,
Right, which I'm not.
so that just means
The
that
only
we're
thing
just
I
gonna
know is
we're
that
just gonna
Henry
have to
Cavill was part of Witcher and decided to
I'd-
come off of it.
look. If you want to avoid the man crush, I understand you want to stay away
Oh,
from.
he's hot.
But-
he's one of those rock studs.
Look, I know
That's
you
why
loved
he's-
him in the Tudors.
That's why he's Superman. Come on. He's just like Dean Cain, only Dean Cain is more conservative.
I'm going to throw down Witcher because books and show. I have some thoughts. I'll throw down some Foundation. No, do I want to do Foundation? I'll do Arcane.
Say Foundation. We're talking Isaac Asimov Foundation.
Foundation, Isaac Asimov. Here's the problem: is if I throw down Foundation, I've not read the books. I'm only watching the show.
Okay.
So that puts me at a slight disadvantage, but there's still a lot of stuff that I can reference in there.
It's also been years
Yeah,
since. Yeah. So,
yeah. Something that I can always bring things back to. I'm going to cheat. I have my list. All right, I'm scratching off Witcher because I did that in bonus episode that I
I
did.
totally agree with all that. They definitely did that to the books. I can't see who wrote that because it's in red.
Oh, that'd be our barkeep
Okay.
who gives me the most knowledge out of anything that I have pulled from
talking
anybody about Star Wars.
Are we talking about so which are we talking about? Because I don't see when that popped up. Was it the Foundation piece that we were talking about, or was it Star Wars that we riffed on earlier?
We were riffing on Star Wars, which I imagine
That's when
that's probably.
That's when it came up.
All right, so I'll scratch out Witcher because I did that last time around. I'm going to do. Let me see if I can do C because I just.
Oh yeah, in reference to that, to those folks who this is the first episode, when she says we did that last time around, it was the practice go round with another colleague of ours who recently left for greener pastures.
All right. I am, and not only did he leave for greener pastures. He left for greener pastures, but we still throw his name around.
Oh, of course.
I don't know if he's aware of that, but
Well, his ears burn every time.
but mostly with regard to the references to conversations that we had, because we used to do this thing. It was you and me and him. We would all sit in the same brow, and I would come in the morning. I would set my bags down. I'd start at the computer, and one of the two of you would spin around in your chair with this devilish look on your face, and be like, "Man, I got a story for you. It's about that conversation we had yesterday. So get this." And that was probably one of the most satisfying stretches of my time in this office, of just always knowing that my morning coffee, well, I don't drink coffee, I drink tea mostly, but my morning hot beverage comes with a story from one of y'all. You guys would come around. I don't even have to say a thing other than, like possibly good morning, or, you look like shit. What happened to you? But it would still be this spin in the chair. And so you remember that thing I was talking about? Well, it happened. Let me tell you. Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. All right. So I'm going to do, you've not seen C, but you've probably seen Game of Thrones. Parts of it. And I might try an easy one, a slow ball. This will be Marvel. Which Marvel?
Just in general. Oh boy, that leaves it wide open.
Yeah, I can't do it to you because, like, if I say
books, we could go.
This is rough. Yeah. No.
Or do we mean Miss Marvel? Or do we mean Captain Marvel?
If that's
and
so,
if we mean Captain
that's
Marvel,
hard. That's the reason why.
Which Captain Marvel? Because the original.
Right. So I mean,
anyway,
and that's
Shazam. To be honest with you.
So I kind of want to homebrew the rule on whether we're going to go more exclusive or inclusive of, like, when someone says, because I already said with you, like, you got to choose one: Family Guy or Futurama or American Dad or Rick and Morty, or which, like, you have a swath. But the challenge in here is to try to neck it down to references from one thing.
Things as part of the new, like, tier 4, I forget what they call it, but it's the post blip, the post return
Right.
genre, where, spoiler alert, Captain America's gone, and the original Avengers are gone, and Tony Stark's dead, and all this other stuff, or just in general, or do you want to do comic books, because that includes X-Men, which are not part of the Marvel universe right now, kinda, except for a few of them that show up because they're not owned by not Sony owns Spider-Man.
Man, this is hard. Okay, so yeah, I'll box myself in and I'll do the Avengers movies.
Okay.
God, this is gonna be hard.
I'm assuming you mean all of the other movies that associate with the Avengers, like Thor and Iron Man.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm gonna need as much help as I can get.
So all of the MCU 1, 2, and 3.
Jeez. If it's in a movie, I saw it.
Okay, fair enough.
All right.
So the Loki series is out.
Loki series is out.
That was actually pretty good.
That was great, and I'm looking forward to the second
me too,
season.
me too.
That's I love the tone of it. I love the direction
And
they
the
went.
Hawkeye, surprisingly, I thought was not that bad. Although Jeremy Renner's kind of a dirtbag. But Hawkeye was not bad. I like Green Arrow better from the DC universe.
Here's for me. I love Yelena from Hawkeye. I love Yelena. Period. Yelena is
That's
the best.
That's
Natasha's sister.
Natasha's sister, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, everything about her is fucking delightful. Just, I can't get enough of her. There needs to be just more Yelena.
Especially her over-the-top Russian accent from a British actress.
I love that Russian accent. I love how over the top it is.
She did her
that
acting
woman.
with marbles in her mouth to make it so, right?
Yeah. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of that die. 4 and 4. So, hot takes. Hot takes from you, hot takes from me, but you got to name them. Something about like 1 to 4 words, something catchy, so that when it rolls on yours, then you have to unpack what you meant by that.
So I was struggling with this. honestly even came up with anything.
Okay.
Just because I can form an opinion on just about anything.
I mean,
Take your,
All right,
take
here,
your four
I'll-
hotcakes and I'll just riff off those.
Okay.
I honestly don't have
so
anything specific.
so here's some ideas, and maybe this will stir up some things. So I've got
Come on, you're the one that did show prep here.
yes, I did way more than I hope this is useful. All right, so one of the panels that I went to at Dragon Con, I mentioned this one. This one was really good. It was a really good conversation, and I feel like we can recreate it here, except the Greg and Kitty version. Should heroes be leaders?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like dovetailing off of this one, I have an affair with villains. I have a thing for villains, modern villains in particular. Not so much the old school ones, because there's always a lot of, this guy woke up bad. He had bad guy coffee. He went to bad guy school.
He has no redeeming qualities whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's just a two-dimensional bad guy, and
He's
all he wanted to do.
bad for the sake of being bad.
But I don't think that we're that way anymore. I don't think that the audience is getting those kinds of stories, because we don't gravitate towards that kind of bad guy. We gravitate towards bad guys with either a redemption arc, or maybe they are a cautionary tale because they started somewhere good first, or so I'm going.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways we can go with that.
Yeah, so I'm going with how good is your bad.
Okay. Remember, we got a four-sided dice there too.
We can also do 3 and 3, because I can tell that this is going to be these could be loaded questions. We can do 3 and 3. And because I know that this is an easy one. The effects of existential threat.
The effects.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any ideas?
No, we can go with any one of those three. Like I said, I struggled with this one.
Okay.
And, couldn't come up with a pithy phrase for anything, but I can riff off of most things. And if not, I got the phone. I can always Google it.
Okay. Then, tell you what, instead of a D8, because we're just going to see how this goes, we'll go with the D4.
Okay.
So the fourth one. I'll call it The Book is Wrong.
Oh, I like that one.
Okay.
Which would imply that if we're talking books and movies, that the movie is right.
Yeah, this could be an interesting one.
Yep.
All right. So, because this is probably going to roll closer to you.
So I got a 3 on the 6.
And I got a 3 on the 4. So that puts us, you said 3 on the 6?
Yep.
Rick and Morty.
Woohoo!
And the effects of existential threats. So we start with a hot take, and we end up at the story.
Okay. We close it out with the story.
Yes. And then how this works is we try to string these two eventually into a meandering but decisively finishing conversation
Okay.
ish. Drop any references that you want. If it feels like it's not clicking, then you just got to meander a little bit more.
Okay. And the hot take is the effects of existential threat.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay. So, the idea that I had in my head when I came up with this one was I was thinking about a D&D term that we're both aware of, moral alignments.
Right.
So for folks that aren't aware of that, that's go to Google, look it up. Moral alignments is something that D&D came up with, but you've seen a lot of memes about it, about whether somebody's chaotic neutral, whether someone is lawful good. What does that mean? It's kind of...
So it actually started out with just three. It started out with lawful,
Okay.
neutral, and chaotic. Those were the three original for Dungeons and Dragons, not AD&D, but the original Dungeons and Dragons, the basic set, the red book, and then the blue book was the expert set, which I have, of course. There were three alignments: lawful, neutral, and chaotic. And Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and what we even have today, expounded on that. And so you have lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil. You had neutral good, true neutral, neutral neutral, and think of the Brady Bunch, right? And the six or the 3x3 matrix, right? So upper left would be lawful good, upper right would be lawful evil. So good is on the left side, top is lawful, chaotic is on the bottom, and right is evil. That's your, and then true neutral is right in the center. And the reason is lawful is somebody who always follows the rules. That doesn't mean that they're good, whereas originally in the original setting, lawful was considered good, except that they realized that somebody could be lawful and absolutely evil. At the same time, somebody could be chaotic, meaning they don't follow rules, but basically good.
Doesn't necessarily mean that you're bad, that you're chaotic. Just means
right.
that.
It just means that you're not following a given set of rules. You're chaotic. And then neutral good means that sometimes you're following the rules, sometimes you're not. It's whatever suits you, but you lean towards the doing good things, however you happen to get there. A lawful good person follows the rules with good intentions all the time. A chaotic good person generally does not ever follow the rules, but always has good intentions. A chaotic evil person, so lawful is very predictable, right? Chaotic is not predictable. And then, of course, good and evil is just good and evil. So that's the first piece to that. I think that needs to have. There you go. Yeah. Grab a true neutral piece of pizza. Actually, it'd be good because it's got the pepperoni to it. The breadsticks are on the other one. So that's the first piece to that, I guess, when you're wanting to use a D&D term. Just pick it up.
I'm struggling.
Take the whole thing. This is. No, you got to be able to see what she's doing here. This is hilarious. Come on. There
It's
we
a
go.
mess.
Yeah.
I'm a mess.
There you go, right there.
This is how you do it.
3 giant things of pizzas just jabbed together. All right.
I like my options.
Yep, there you go. So that's if you're going back to a D&D concept, that's the origins of that D&D concept.
So it's very not quite Myers-Briggs, very not quite personality test.
I mean,
are you a couch or are you a...
So yeah, I mean,
Shea Lounge.
You could argue that it is. I think that people today could be. Classified in any of those 9 areas. But then, of course, the issue becomes, how do you classify them? Is it how they act? or is it what they say? And this goes to what we've talked about with, actually it's part of the dissertation piece. Is it your stated intention? Is it what you say you would do in situations? Or is it what you actually do in situations? Because, everybody presumably likes to say, oh yeah, I would do certain things, or I would behave a certain way in a given situation. But then the question is, would you really? Would you really do something when people are getting rounded up and taken to camps?
So this is kind of what brought up the idea, is that several years ago when Game of Thrones was still running, I had a conversation with some people who play D&D. I don't play D&D with them, but we were trading some stories, and I started asking them what Game of Thrones characters' moral alignments would possibly be.
Right, yeah.
It was an interesting conversation, but mainly because when you introduce the idea of existential threat, it changes their moral alignment. Because there are some things that they did because they knew that if they didn't do it, then either there's the end of the world coming, or you gotta think about it in terms of, are they doing it for political micro reasons, or are they doing it for macro saving the lives of everybody reasons, because White Walkers, or because dragons, or are they just feuding over kingdoms and not caring who wins on top when the White Walkers come? It's like, as long as it's me in the high tower, then I am the winner, and the White Walkers can come get me, and I still finish last. So the moral alignments were changing when you introduce existential threat, because the end game for them winds up being the deciding factor of, but everybody dies if you don't do that.
So
I don't know how much you remember.
I have not read all of the books, and I know that they diverge, and I have not gotten past season 1, to be honest with you.
That we can work with that.
But I know enough of the story here and there that I can follow along with what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I know, bad fantasy guy, I got it. But as far as that goes, my take is that if your moral alignment, if your alignment changes, if you change because of the threat, then chances are you didn't have a firm moral grounding to begin with. So look at it this way. A person who is out for themselves, lots of times we would classify them as either neutral or evil, using the moral alignment code, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good is generally associated with putting other people ahead of ourselves, whereas evil is generally self-centered, right? Arguably, somebody who is on the evil side of the spectrum, when faced with an existential threat that wipes out everybody, is still evil. Evil people can still do good things, because in the act of saving everyone else, they're saving their own skin. That doesn't make them good. It means that they're saving themselves. It just happens that they're saving everybody else at the same time.
That may not be the only reason why they do it, though. They might be true believers. They might be, regardless of their own self-preservation, they might be doing it because they think that they are saving everybody.
In which case, it's either a self-serving, if their moral alignment is true, or their moral alignment was incorrect in the first place, and they were actually more neutral than, let's say lawful evil, right? Let's take the one extreme. Somebody who follows the rules. Well, a lot of people say chaotic evil is the one extreme, but let's say lawful evil, because that is the absolute, I do everything all the same evil, right? And then suddenly that person is doing something good, to save themselves, but to save other people and receive accolades or whatever. If they're doing it for anything other than a self-serving reason, then they are not really, their alignment doesn't change. what I'm saying is that they were self-delusional if they self-assigned that alignment. Most people, I think, in reality, books are separate, but good books are a reflection of good stories, not even books, good stories, whether they're screenplays, whether they're verbal stories, whether they're written stories, whatever. Good stories are a reflection of society, or a reflection of people. And most people are probably somewhere in the middle of that nine boxed chart, right?
Right.
So they're neutral. Sometimes they'll do good, sometimes they'll do bad, sometimes they'll be self-serving, sometimes they won't be. A lot of philosophers would say, especially classical philosophers would say, that most people are self-serving.
I think
to what extreme?
So I think that you're right in that whether it's in stories or whether it's us, we are self-serving initially. I mean, we kind of have to be in order for self-preservation to be accomplished. But I think when you come up against a conflict, what you do in the face of that conflict becomes the decision that says everything about you.
Okay.
So if you are an everyday coward,
right,
and suddenly, let's keep it in time with White Walkers. If it's White Walkers that wind up storming the city,
White Walkers are the ones that come from the north,
correct?
Break through the wall, and winter is coming, kind of thing.
Right.
Okay. Just making sure I understand.
So,
and for other people who haven't read the books,
for other people that haven't read the books, if the White Walkers come, it's kind of zombie apocalypse-ish in that way.
It's like the FBI coming to your door and taking it down. Yeah.
Yeah. So White Walkers coming, it's bad. It's bad for everybody, and nobody survives, kind of thing. Yeah, or you become one of them.
Okay.
So, but you, the everyday coward, for some reason, you see an attack on somebody that is important to you, or somebody that you find to be absolutely innocent and unable to defend themselves, or you see an attack on maybe you're a vet, and they attack something that has national history importance or something like that. Maybe that, and for some reason you go from coward to hero in a second.
Okay.
I think in that second, your moral alignment does change.
Okay.
Regardless of what your day-to-day has been, there is a moment that happens in the face of existential threat that your moral alignment switches.
That's the hero in us all kind of theory.
Kind of. It could also be the bad guy in us all.
Okay. Yeah. So the counter to that then would be, you're generally a good person. You generally help people or do whatever, and then you are suddenly presented with the opportunity where you are very confident that you're not going to get caught, whatever the opportunity is, and you go and you break the rules for your own personal self-gain. Right? So that's the opposite. There's no existential threat necessarily. Mm-hmm. Or maybe there is. Maybe it's you're doing something and you have the option of sacrificing yourself for the good of someone else, or saving your own skin, and you run off and save your own skin, and you just kind of deal with it afterwards.
Well, there's also, you find out there's an asteroid headed for the world. Seen enough of those videos, or those movies, right?
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry.
Any number of things. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just thinking of the Bruce Willis movie.
Yeah. I mean,
with the Steve Buscemi character.
There's any number of things that people decide to do when they realize, that their days are numbered.
Yeah, well, again, both good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would, one of my team sergeants and I would have conversations about this a lot in our 2006 deployment. And we would talk about, we've done we've been in this many gunfights, or we've been in this many whatever, and but you never know the next one, because you always hear the stories. Yeah, this guy, he was always a guy you could rely on and everything else, and then on this one objective, he froze up and had to be taken off the line. Same thing with jumpers, right? So you had 100 jumps, and on that 101st jump or that 102nd jump or whatever it is, that's it. It's done. There's a story of a I think it's an urban legend. I don't know, one of the, I think he's either one of the Golden Knights or one of the jumpers down at Bragg. He had like 4,000 free fall jumps and everything else, and then one day he said, "I'm done," for no real reason. And when they asked him about it, and this guy had combat jumps, he had the whole thing, and he said, "Well, I just realized that I'm no longer afraid." And it clicked with him that I'm no longer afraid, and therefore I'm not cutting edge, and so I am a detriment to myself and to others. So he took himself off the line. In what we would say is, because you can train for it all you want, and you never know until you're in. You never know how you're going to react until you're in the situation. You can train for it, and that's what we've done for the last 100 years, is train people for it, and that's one of the reasons why you see a level of PTSD, because we've overcome that human reluctance to kill other humans. This is the book on killing.
Okay. Heard of it.
So you train that out of people. The problem is you get them to react in the moment, and they do, and all of that's fine. So on the other aspect, someone who gravitates towards the special operations piece generally doesn't have a problem psychologically with that part. But sometimes there is a breaking point where I just can't do it anymore for whatever reason. Sometimes people identify that in time, and they're not in the situation anymore. They pull themselves out. They self-select out, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's know yourself.
At least they're able to recognize that.
Right. Yeah. So one of the first leadership principle, in fact, one of the things that I told my son repeatedly and got drilled into me at school was the first leadership principle is to know yourself, seek self-improvement. And so people who self-select themselves out of a situation, even if, in a lot of cases, these guys are certifiable badasses. They've got a body count that rivals myth, right? I mean, verifiable body count that rivals myth. And they say, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to go be a staff guy. I'm going to support you where I can, but I can't do it anymore. And that's okay. There are other times where people are in the middle of it, and it hits them, and they freeze up. And what we would, in our conversations, my team sergeant and I back and forth, we would just don't let it happen to me this time, right? Let me at least be aware to self-select to take myself out of the situation if that's the case. But when it comes time, I need to be able to pull the trigger at that time, every time, because it's not me that's on the line, it's everybody around me. So that's knowing yourself. I think our barkeep will probably understand, because he's been there too.
There's a show I know I've mentioned to you before, Peacemaker. Not Peacekeeper, Peacemaker. There's a
Peacemakers. That's not the.
It's John Cena.
I thought that was. Yeah.
It's a DC show.
Yeah, with the gold hat.
I want to say it's silver, but yeah, like the guy with the.
He looks almost like a Egyptian.
Yeah.
God helmet kind of thing.
There's So there's
he was on Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
Too, right?
Yeah. Great spin-off series that he's in. Highly recommend it. There's a scene in there where he is lined up for a shot. He and a bunch of people are lying in wait. It's nighttime. They're doing watching a house, and they're getting ready to pick off somebody that they need to pick off. And he's the one that's supposed to take the shot. And this is the same guy who says that he will make peace. Doesn't matter how many men, women, and children he's got to kill in order to do it. But that's his mantra. That's his code. And it's a very interesting scene to me because of how embedded in him as a character that is the whole I will do anything to make peace, and the way that he freezes up before attempting to take the shot. Somebody recognizes before he does that he's freezing and he's about to lose his window.
Right.
But I think it's very interesting what you were saying about you can train for it all that you want, but once you're in the moment, then whatever the real behavior that is wired in you comes out.
Right. And the thing is, the big key is that each time it's different. My point was that you could behave the way that you trained over and over and over and over and over again. And on the 13th time or the 14th time, or whatever it is, that's the time that you can't do it for whatever reason. Whether it's everybody likes to point to PTSD. That we like, some of us like to joke about. We don't have PTSD. We're carriers. We give it to others.
No, there's different facets of it. There's a lot of sound bites out there, but there are definitely different facets of this.
It's like having a dormant virus. Yeah, I've got PTSD, but it's not active in me. I'm just giving it to others. That same line of other poor sap.
That sounds like kids talking about their parents, strangely.
Well, that's exactly what we're doing.
Parents handing off their trauma to kids.
Something like that.
Some generational trauma. Would you say that Morty is not someone that freezes up in the face of existential threat?
Oh, Morty absolutely freezes up most of the time. That's so if you want to end this conversation.
I'm working with you. I'm working with you on this. I'm helping. I help.
I thought we were good. I'm helping. Woo-hoo.
Yeah.
So so Morty freezes up more often than not. It's that other rare occasion where he doesn't. Ironically, with them, Summer is the more predictable sidekick for Rick than Morty is, I think. It's not often that she's the sidekick. There's a couple times where Rick tells Morty that I'm going to replace you with Summer, but it's the thing with that is there are a few places where Morty actually comes up with the answer when Rick doesn't. But for the most part, Morty absolutely freezes up because that's Morty's character. That's what he does. Now it's evolved, but he is. So he's become he's become more self-confident, and that's that evolution of his character over the seasons. Just like Rick has become more. Not tolerant, but he cares for his family more. For those of you who haven't seen it, this is going to be a spoiler, but he's remember that kind of Rick's mantra is I can always go find another family, right? I can always go to another dimension, and this of course brings up the whole infinite worlds. Well, there's a few of them where actually, technically by infinity, there's an infinite number of this. The problem is finding it. Think about taking it back to Iron Man real quick, or taking it back to the Avengers real quick.
All right.
Where Doctor Strange, when they're on the planet, how many at the end of Avengers 1, or the first event, the Infinity War.
Yeah.
The first one of the two, where he says, I looked at 84 million, whatever the number is, different iterations. Well, how many did we win? Just the one.
Mm-hmm.
And well, that's because he stopped at the first one where they won. It's like, what? It was in the last place I looked. Well, no shit. You found
Right.
it. You found it in the last place.
And you're not going to look anywhere else.
You're not going to keep. No, I found it in the second to last place I looked, but I wanted to be sure. So even though I had the keys in my hand, I kept looking. Really?
Right.
So it's the same kind of thing. There were infinitely more possibilities out there
That he did not look
that
at?
he didn't look at.
Really?
Well, yeah, they're by definition. If there are infinite possibilities,
I would have thought that he would have done like a comprehensive look at everything.
You can't. Infinity goes on forever.
I don't know what the limits of his vision are. He is Doctor Strange, so that was a little bit.
This is the point. If you're dealing with infinite realms, right?
Mhm.
It's an iterative process. You have to go one, then the next, then the next, then the next.
This is our
Now,
conversation about infinity,
right,
isn't it?
Right. Yeah. So infinity, by definition, goes on forever. So the question of how big is infinity? Well, it's infinite. It doesn't stop. There is nothing bigger than infinity. There is no infinity plus one because infinity plus one equals infinity. The question is a matter of time. Where do you stop in that iterative process? And so in Doctor Strange's case, he stopped at the first one he could find. Presumably, I mean, that's what it sounds like. Maybe he kept going to see if there was a better option than the one that he found. And then he said, okay, time's up. Time's up. Let's do this. Leroy Jenkins, right? We've run it through this.
Leroy Jenkins.
36% is the best I can get. Okay, that's fine. But there are still more options out there that may be better. Well, the same thing in Rick and Morty when he's talking about there are infinite realities. Now, what we learned later on is that he talks about the finite curve. Well, finite, by definition, is a limited set out of infinity. And that finite curve is the number of ones in which he's the smartest guy in the universe, right?
Yeah.
Except that arguably a finite set within infinity could also be considered infinite, but that's kind of too much, and I don't have the math to back that one up. But he has the central finite curve, right? C316 or whatever is I forget what his reality code is, right? Well, that means they have a set number of them. So if he's only looking within the finite curve, then yes, there's only 7 or 8 places that he can go.
Okay.
Now, the irony is if he goes to a reality in which he is not the smartest guy in the universe, which is anything outside the finite curve, he could pick anything. And if he goes there, he is now the smartest guy in the universe.
Yes.
So why not just pick one of those?
I mean, easily you can. What moral alignment would he have to be in order to decide to do that?
Oh, he could be any of them. So Rick can be, I think Rick arguably is probably true neutral.
You think so? Okay.
So you've got cases of him doing things that are absolutely self-serving. You've got cases of him doing things that are absolutely not self-serving, where he believes he's going to die.
Is true neutral that you will do any of the things that any of the other moral alignments will do, or you are willing to do something that none of the moral alignments are able to do?
Probably both. True neutral is true neutral. You can be good, you can be evil, you can follow the rules, you cannot follow the rules. It is whatever works at the time for whatever reason you need to at the time. Are you doing it for someone else or are you doing it for yourself? Well, it could be either. It could be both. Are you going to follow the rules or you're not going to follow the rules? Could be either one. Could be a combination. That's true neutral. True neutral is absolutely go in any direction for any reason at any time.
I mean, it can be interpreted as anybody else's version. Like I feel like the same can be said for any Hogwarts house. You can take any action and interpret it in any house's language. Like, this is what the Ravenclaws would say about it. This is what the Gryffindor would say about it. But it would still be the same action. It's not that anybody is more capable than anybody else of doing
that's
that.
probably true with anything. Any action by somebody who is aligned, going back to the D&D alignment, anybody who is actually aligned true neutral, their actions would be all across the spectrum.
Yeah.
So anybody could explain it in that action, this shows that that person is lawful good. Yes, but this other action shows that they're chaotic neutral.
I always took true neutral to be a will not take any sides no matter what, but also will not make sure that, or will not allow for any sides to get ahead.
You could take it that way, except that would actually be more lawful neutral, I think, because that's a law.
Okay.
That's a rule that you're following. And if
Fair.
you follow it all the time, then you're lawful by definition.
Fair.
So chaotic neutral, true neutral, and lawful neutral, and then the other spectrum, neutral good and neutral evil, are all kind of interesting in that you have flexibility, but true neutral arguably provides the most flexibility. And I would also argue that nobody is truly true neutral.
Except
Rick. But Rick's cartoon. And remember, it's only C137? C137. When you are the smartest guy in the universe and can jump around, you are near godlike.
I am suddenly reminded of what is that chemical or that compound that it's radioactive. Like, Potter used to talk about it all the time. Like, you could have a thumbnail of it and it can kill everybody within like a 30-mile radius. It's like CS-175 or CS-137 or something like that.
I should know this, but
there was a nugget of it. The yeah, I think it was that was what it was.
Yeah, I don't know which one's the radioactive isotope. I think it's 137, but I don't know. So Twitter will freak out on me.
If anybody knows what that is, then let me know. Let's do another roll.
Okay.
Yeah. Go for it.
6 first. Oh, we got 3 again. You want me to re-roll?
Let's do a re-roll, and whatever the re-roll is, we take. What you got?
I can't tell.
4. So the hot takes is a 4.
Yep.
And you are doing the re-roll. I guess we're doing Rick and Morty again.
Woohoo!
Okay, so Rick and Morty for the stories. And the book is wrong.
Book is wrong. Okay.
So any way that we can spin this. Initially when I had said the book is wrong, I had meant it in a couple of different ways. One, either with historiography, which I have to thank one of our colleagues who's currently in Germany for introducing the term to me. Historiography, for those who don't know, is the history of history, or the study of the history of history. And the reason why I'm interested in this is that when we consider that history is written by the winner, then we understand that history is curated. So as we go along in time, studying things and new artifacts surfacing and new perspectives surfacing, we keep on adding on to history. So history is not something that is set in stone. It is continually growing and filling out. So the book is wrong is one of the ways that I was getting ready to interpret that. Okay. That can mean anything from plot lines, like when we go back in somebody's backstory to fill out what had happened here because they see a different side of a story and they have the ability to fill in what had happened.
So what's interesting is taking it in the context that you just gave with the new discoveries. You could almost argue the counterpoint of the book is right. In that, the, and this is the Rick and Morty tie-in, but it's not to finish it.
Okay. Have it.
The greatest story ever told is the Bible. And we are finding more and more proof that the stories in the Bible actually occurred. The locations that were thought to be not there are being found to be there in the locations that the Bible says they happened. And it's happening with more and more frequency. It doesn't get a lot of play, but it's happening. And I think it's not getting a lot of play because it is counter to a lot of other books that are wrong, that say that this never happened. That was just a nice story, and it was just it was a metaphor for this, except that it is being shown that no, this place actually was there, right where the Bible says it was. And actions, especially large level actions for which we can have a record, we're finding artifacts that back up the idea that those things actually happened. The things that we've been told by scholars for years who are anti-Bible, anti-Christian, anti-Jew, whatever, that no, this never happened. That's just a nice story. Well, that's funny because we're making more and more discoveries that says no, that this actually did happen, right where it said it was. So it does cut both ways. And then of course there's the rewriting of history. I don't like that it happened. So, and this is happening in the United States today. I don't like that it happened, and so I'm going to rewrite it, or I'm going to ignore certain facts because it doesn't fit my narrative today. I'm going to overplay some facts and downplay other facts, or completely ignore some facts because they get in the way of the narrative that I'm trying to craft and say this is historical. Look at the 1619 Project from the New York Times. That's utter crap. And it's been disproven. And yet, those lies are being perpetuated as facts and are being taught as facts in our colleges. So any college student listening, go do your own damn research. Go find, the best thing to do is to find some history books from 30, 40 years ago and compare them to what you're being taught today. Go find some first-person accounts. Well, especially the two older academies. So West Point and the Naval Academy both have archives of graduates, especially West Point, that's what I'm familiar with, has first-person records. It has primary historical records of most of the history of the United States from a military standpoint because, as they like to say, much of the history we teach was made by the people that we taught, which is true. And they've got letters and all this other first-person primary evidence that it gives you direct insight. So you're not having to read what some scholar thinks it means. You can actually read what the guy wrote and decide for yourself. Most people today, unfortunately, don't. They allow somebody. There are a lot of cases where people have opinions on, especially personalities, that they don't necessarily agree with. And they've never bothered to listen to that personality or to that person and what that person has to say. What they do is they listen to a broadcaster, a newscaster, a whatever, who interprets what they say for them. But the funny thing is, those people usually don't even show you what it is they said, or they show you a very small portion of it and they don't give you the full context. So it's the I don't know if it's a parable or just a story, but arguably it's a parable of the wise men, the group of wise, I think it's an Indian parable, the blind wise men investigating an elephant, and the one feels the trunk, and he says, "Oh, an elephant is like a snake because he's feeling the trunk and it's long and foldable." Another one said, "No, no, no, an elephant is like a tree because he's down at the foot. It's a big round thing like that." And they're not wrong, but they're also not right. And when you only get part of the story interpreted by somebody else, who, by the way, is blind, then you're fooled.
Well, blind people also have the ability to add their own perspective to the story. So, the fact that there are so many pieces of history missing that later get added on to, and maybe almost always like an inopportune time for people because they're so wed to history as it is written that it's inconvenient or challenging to accept that there are other pieces that could also be included in the books. I've been taking my thoughts down and following your arc here in the conversation. So I'm going to start from way up top when you're talking about things that had happened in the Bible that were actually there and so forth. There's a piece of me that is very much I always wanted to be the Tomb Raider. I always wanted to be Lara Croft. So there's the part of me that was like, if I stumble into a temple and go, "Oh, this is actually here," that is my favorite part of any tomb raiding kind of movie.
Okay, Angela.
Whether it's Indiana Jones, all for it. Uncharted or Tomb Raider, or there's a litany of different kinds. What is it?
Tales of the Brass Monkey.
Didn't I?
Remember that one? Come on.
I actually just watched. What was it? Quartermain.
Yep. Alan
Quartermain. I think it was Solomon's Mines. Yeah,
Yep.
that was on TV.
That's a good one.
Strangely, like a few weeks ago.
Which, of course, Alan Quartermain shows up in what's the it's got Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's got the Invisible Man.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Thank you. League of
Yeah.
Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah. They so
Tom Sawyer.
for me, anything that shows up in anyone's holy writings that proves that there was an actual thing just opens up the challenge of describing. So there's the world as we know it on this plane, but there's more, and that's always the conversation. But there's also I'm trying to remember the name of the movie.
So ancient alien theorists would say yes. Just throwing that one out there.
Did you ever see? I want to say the movie was called Wicker Man.
I know of it. I haven't seen it.
God, I hope this is the movie that I'm thinking of. Wicker Man had it was either Wicker Man or some other movie that came out around the same time where there was this scientist, this female scientist that was hired to go and investigate what somebody claimed to be miracles that were happening. I think it was like down by the bayou or something like that. And she has this great rant. Somebody asked her about, do you believe in miracles or something like that? And she goes through this like A through Z of why there's a scientific explanation for every miracle that has ever happened. She said, take when, I think it was when Moses had challenged the Pharaoh or something like that, and then you had the river running red with blood or being blood, or you had locusts, and you had, she described all the plagues and then gave the scientific explanation of how one plague or one plague led into the next, and here's
algae.
Yeah. So she's like, there is a scientific explanation for all of this. And like in her mind, she was there not necessarily to explain away the miracles, but to debunk it.
Okay. So arguably from the religious side of things, all of those scientific explanations may be correct, and the believer would say, well, duh, because God did that, which is honestly what I would say, because when you start getting statistical probability of things happening like that when they say they're going to happen, the statistical probability of those things happening like that are very slim to none. I mean, it's approaching zero. We talk about infinity in one direction, it's approaching zero in another, which is infinity getting down to 0.00007.
Yeah.
So there's a scientific explanation. Well, why is that? Well, it's because God created the universe and all things in it. And so, yes, when the rivers run with blood and it's red algae, well, yeah. Except that at that time, when the rivers are going to run with blood, and boom, the rivers are running with red algae. Guess what? I'm a forecast. No, it's because the mechanism's in place, and so it's using a Family Guy reference. Lois, who is not that religious, actually makes a good point. There's an episode where one of Stewie's little friends is sick, and his parents are I forget the sect. I don't know that it's Seventh Day Adventist or what. I don't want to get that wrong, but there's a sect of Christianity that believes if God is going to heal us, then we're going to let God heal us. It's that whole inshallah, if God wills it, vein of thought, right? We're not going to do anything, and God will make it happen. And Lois steals the kid, takes him in because he's got cancer and he just needs treatment. And it's a fairly simple cancer that is child cancer, but it's one that's easily treatable, right? And of course they get all pissed off. We believe that if God is going to heal, and she makes the point, well, could it be that God provided these doctors and this medicine to answer your prayer?
But it could also be somebody who could be a believer, but also reading the room a little bit. Like if there are already doctors who are, focusing in on or all drawn to, let's say, a kid that's got cancer of a very rare kind. And all these doctors are like, I want to be the one to solve this one, or I want to be the one that diagnoses this one correctly, or name this one after me, or whatever. Then somebody who's a believer reading the room says, you will have all the help that you need. God is sending help.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
and
like, it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. Okay. In its sense. And I feel like, like if it were true with the whole, it wasn't the river running red with blood, but it was the river running with algae, it could be like blood. Okay. Then it was entirely possible that on one hand the interpretation could be correct, and on the other hand the interpretation could also be correct. There's not.
Yes, I guess my point is the idea of saying, well, it has a scientific reason and therefore God doesn't exist because it has a scientific reason is utter crap. If you choose not to believe in God, you know what? That's your business. I'm going to use, and I forget where I got this. This isn't my thought, but I've made it my own. Here's the thing. When speaking to somebody who doesn't believe, if you're right and I'm wrong, then no harm, no foul. When we die, right?
Right.
When we die, there's nothing, and I'm just dead, and I've, arguably wasted some time on Earth, and you got to enjoy yourself. But what happens if I'm right and you're wrong? Well, you're fucked, because you've rejected what was told to you, and there ain't one place you're going if you're a Christian. If you're not, well, you're still fucked because that's, anyway. We won't go down that road. But if a true atheist, now here's the other thing. A true atheist, when you talk to them, actually does believe in a higher power. When you start drilling into it, they do. They believe in this scientific bullshit of a big bang with no higher power. And we all came from a rock.
Is that atheist or agnostic, though?
Well, agnostic is no religion, and atheist is like, I guess 6 1 half dozen the other. To be honest with you, I mean that there. I know that there's a difference. I can't articulate.
I want to say that one of them is. I want to say it's agnostic. That is, there is something. I'm not going to give it a name, but there is something.
Yeah. Okay. So an atheist is really an agnostic in that they believe in something. Usually they like to argue that, oh, I believe in science. Well, the science that they believe in is a faith-based religion because there are simply too many holes that require faith. They have faith that there are the gaps. There are these gaps that are going to get filled. That's a faith. I'm sorry, it is. You call it. You can pretend just because I say that this is a tomato doesn't make it a tomato. You can call it whatever you want. The fact is that you are believing that there is an answer in this idea that humans evolved from molten rock.
This actually kind of goes into what the next thing that I had put down about what you were saying was you were talking about go and read some first person accounts.
Mm-hmm.
You want to know what went on in history, read some first person accounts. There is a flaw in there, in that first person accounts, while these are people that were there, it is their one side of side of a story. I'm not going to say one-sided interpretation because like they're actually gathering. Like, if you think about all of us as being like transmitters and receivers, we're all transmitting, receiving different frequencies on different bandwidths. But someone who's putting something down in their journal may tell you what they saw that day.
And they'll also tell you what they think of it usually.
Yes.
And what it meant to them.
Yes.
And why it was happening.
And what informed their perception of seeing a thing.
Oh, yeah.
So first person accounts absolutely are solid things for people to read. As long as you keep in mind, consider the source.
Well, and that's the key to that's the whole mantra that we use at work, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about different reports that come in of things,
mm-hmm.
that's exactly what we're talking about. And in some cases, I heard it on the radio. Well, yeah. Well, was that a technical means? Technically, yes, because you heard a signals transmission, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you classify that as, so in our parlance, a SIGINT report or a signals transmission report, then that might get classified one way. The problem is what you're hearing is actually human. It's human reporting. It's somebody talking, and the way that you are listening, just like somebody listening to us or watching this, right? I'm the source of the information right now. Now, if I say, hey, I saw this, you can go look it up and look up, that's my subsource. You can go look up the subsource, same as your subsource.
Yeah.
But all opinions are my own, right? Greg Suchanek, blame me. Don't cancel me, just blame me. So and certainly don't cancel Kitty here. There's no one there. No one's listening. No one's there except for Karen and
Yet.
Yet. That's all right. So in the next episode, have all your comments ready when if I'm invited back, and you can rag on me then. But you got to pay your $4. So I'm still a human source, just like you said. Consider the source, right? No, you're absolutely right. But that informs, as one of our old bosses would say, that informs.
It does. It allows context.
That's exactly right.
And the thing is that with that context, there are pieces that can be confirmed, but also pieces that can be false negatives.
Yes, or false positives.
Or false positives.
Yeah, they can be falsified.
Yes.
Right. This is why multiple sourcing of anything is so important. Right? Never go with one source. Oh, I heard it on CNN. That's brilliant. Did you at least check MSNBC? I mean, they're going to say the same thing. right? Well, I never watch Fox News. Well, maybe you should, because then you're going to get the same report with a different angle to it. And somewhere in the middle is the truth.
So you won't know as much what the truth winds up being until you've gathered all of the stories.
And even then, you may not ever get the truth.
Well, you won't get the full truth, which is what I think like a lot of historians are struggling with as their mission, like filling out history as much as humanly possible. But ultimately, when we are falling back on first person accounts, we are still interpreting perceptions, and we are still interpreting an angle of an event.
Yes.
And we are still talking about things like where is this person in their life when they saw that event?
Yes, and what were their experiences and what were their backgrounds?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
And so the data scientist in me and other people like that would say, well, then you disregard all that and you just go with strictly data. Right? Mm-hmm. Well, except that what we're talking about is data. And,
yeah.
and so we're talking about a human, like you said, a collector receiver, which is a human being, right? And then you've got the limitation of language, written, spoken, whatever it is. You've got the limitation of language to capture the abstract ideas and be able to convey them. Well, communication requires a sender and a receiver and a medium to send and receive that both sides understand. If I say one word and you hear that word, but your definition of that word is something, let's think about
absolutely.
Think about the 2008 presidential election. It was brilliant. President Obama's campaign was brilliant because what was his slogan? Hope and change. Well, that could mean anything to anyone. If you believe that America sucks and needs to be radically changed from the inside out, then he's your guy. If you believe some of the institutions need to be changed and we need a little bit of tweaking here and there and we've got hope for the future, then that's your guy, because hope and change means whatever you need it to mean. Arguably, so does Make America Great Again. Except that in this case, the person delivering it, a lot of people had preformed opinions of it. But the slogan itself, same thing, Build Back Better. Right? Any of these slogans can mean anything. And the trick is to not define them. Because the moment you define your terms, now you're boxing yourself in. This is from the politician's standpoint. You want an ambiguous theme. This is any kind of thematic thing that appeals to everybody. You want everybody to be able to relate to it. Good movies do that. They relate on so many levels, right? When you start and this is why we talk about you need to define what is the word is. It depends on what the meaning of the word is, to quote Bill Clinton, President Bill Clinton, I should say, giving him the respect of office. It depends. It depends on what you think something means. And that's important, because if I say something and you nod, but you heard something different, then I haven't communicated my idea to you. This is the biggest problem with communication in general.
Well, so back and forth on that.
You're the conflict resolution person here.
Well, so and you're absolutely right that language is extremely rich but inaccurate. And when we use that language is also a minefield, because we could be using the same word and saying two completely different things.
Absolutely.
That is, to me, one of the pitfalls when you're either telling a story or when you're writing history.
Yep.
Because if I'm a, oh no.
Time's up.
No, it's telling me that should we decide to call it after this topic, then we can probably spare some people their ears. But if we want to selflessly go on ahead, we can for another 30 minutes.
I would say we let the viewers decide, but fuck them, they're not there. So you all can suffer through it till we're done. Go ahead.
All right. So, but yeah, so if the way that history is written can be so impactful, but also built on toothpicks, which is what flimsy language that we have is, then there are problems on for things like looking back on first person accounts, because maybe the words that they're using are loaded in a way that we in modern times don't understand or can't unpack for them.
Some of the meanings of those words have completely changed.
It's true. So, and the thing that I was going to say about looking at stories that are occurring now versus looking at them after they have occurred, like 20 years down the road or whatever. I'm looking at because I'm gonna out myself on this one. Miss Marvel was my introduction to partition, and then after that I started researching all kinds of things about partition, and I looked at podcasts that were that was the separation of Pakistan and India after the Brits left.
Okay, got it.
In 1947.
Yeah.
I am vastly obsessed with this because I think it's always interesting, trying to answer the question, what happens when your adversary looks just like you?
Oh, yeah.
So, and I don't think India and Pakistan had initially wanted to look at each other like adversaries. They just needed their own place, right? But right after the Brits left, in fact, Independence Day was, I think it was like, oh, someone's going to crucify me on this one, August 15, 1947. And then the following day was, everybody pick up your shit and move. And then there was this waking up on the wrong side of the border for a lot of people, and suddenly like millions of people having to do cross-country movement, and lots of people getting killed in the process, getting disappeared in the process, killing each other in the process, their own family members being killed by their own family members. Just this thing actually happened in history, and it is fascinating to me to look at it from all sides, whether it's from the Indian side or the Pakistani side, but looking at it from a humanitarian aspect, because I want to learn what the lessons are should something, for instance, happen in the States, where suddenly everybody looks at each other and no longer is on the same side.
Something did happen to the States, 1860.
So I want... Oh. So looking along the lines of something that is sanctioned is different from looking at something that spontaneously evolved. Because with India and Pakistan, it actually was a planned thing. But it was poorly communicated to it.
It was planned by whom?
It was planned by the Brits, but asked for by the future Pakistanis, if I understand correctly. Because, so...
But did they have a say in the split, or did they just ask? Was it a case of a 13-year-old kid, not saying obviously Pakistanis are 13-year-old kids, but was it the case of like a young teenager saying, "Hey, I want my freedom," and suddenly you need to go get your own damn apartment because careful what you wish for? Because that was Panama.
Fair. I'll clarify for folks who need the Cliff's Notes version. So, India and Pakistan were one country up until 1947, and the Brits had just wrapped from being in World War II and looked at their bank accounts and said, we just can't handle all the different... we can't handle having all these colonies, so we're gonna have to cash in, so to speak.
So they were doing it for a self-serving reason.
They were doing it for a self-serving reason,
So
and And at the time,
Good
what
or evil? I mean, I'm just
funny?
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
No, you're doing right. You're doing right. The what happened was that the Muslims and the Hindus looked like each other, but were also asking for different spaces.
Right.
And I believe it was the Muslims that were feeling sidelined in much of the conversation, or feeling not taken seriously, or feeling like, look, we just want to be recognized in our own spot. And to make that known in a very impactful way, they went on. There were some Hindu killing sprees, and there were Muslim killing sprees, in order to make the message known to the Brits that were still there. You see the problem we're having, and you're still here. Before you leave, can you draw a line that we can separate ourselves amongst ourselves before you shut the door on your way out?
And then we'll just fight over it for the next 8 years.
So, I mean, that was essentially kind of what happened after the Brits hired a cartographer who had never seen India or Pakistan, or had never seen then India, and said, hey, cartographer, draw a line, whatever you want it to look like. And he never visited any of the places.
He drew a line and said, that'll be 10,000 pounds. Thank you very much.
Funny, and you should say that. He wrote a letter to his cousin, and he said, I am not taking the money, but I am also running, because there are millions of people who will be looking for my ass once I'm out of here, because their lives will be affected, and it'll be all because of me. So Independence Day happens. There's celebration because independence, and then the following day the killing starts.
Right.
As people are up and moving. There are trains that are moving people from one side of the country to the other side of the country, and sometimes those trains just show up with cars after cars of carcasses, because the wrong side got on the train, and then there was a massacre. So hugely impactful. An entire population that has PTSD and won't talk about a thing that the entire country went through. Because as I understand it, it's not very well documented until now. Nowadays, with the advent of Facebook and YouTube, there have been reunifications of families, or of neighbors, or of spouses that have been that at one point were holding hands, and then at another point just wound up on two different trains. So there's been numerous stories and numerous ways of people reconnecting, because things like the internet just made it so. But there's also been projects upon projects to be able to raise awareness that if you lived here, that here is no longer there. Or if you lived in a village that was split down the middle by that border made things so complicated for people who lived in that village that's now bisected. Very, very complicated. And this is their story. So I'm vastly fascinated with this, because that is no longer theory, that is practice. That is something that was that had happened, that people went through, that people, for kind of obvious reasons, didn't want to start handing that trauma down to the next generation and telling them all the lurid or morbid stories. But those stories are starting to come out now, like several generations later. And so something like that, where you realize that it wasn't, this side versus that side. Both sides were going through it at the same time. There wasn't a good guy or a bad guy in this. There was survival. So for me, watching that happen colors the words when there is any current news about who's in the wrong, when you have this in the background, this backdrop. And so that, for me, that's my recent historiography obsession. So bringing it back to Rick and Morty.
Sure. and then I think we'll wrap it up. Just like Karen posted there, call it, and people will want more later on. always leave them wanting more. Right? I believe is what we're going with. So bringing it back to Rick and Morty, not necessarily with the histography. However, you could, again, going back to that alternate reality piece, right?
Yeah.
So Rick C-137, the Rick that we follow, his wife and daughter are vaporized, right? So if it's, again, spoiler alert, if you watch the beginning of season 3 where they're in the Shoney's, and the bug agent, who's played by Nathan Fillion, the guy from Firefly.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
he's the voice for it. And he says you can't change aspects of they're in a brainalyzer, and you can't change aspects of a memory. And Rick says, well, you can change something that's entirely made up. Well, it turns out it's not made up. His memory of that day was more or less correct, and he modified one piece of it in order to get out of the brainalyzer. But you don't find that out till later on. So his Beth is vaporized. There is no Rick, or there is no Morty, rather. There is no Summer from his timeline. He ends up taking the place of the Rick that did it to him, and taking that family over, because Beth survived in that one, and married Jerry, and they have Rick and Morty, and that's the one that becomes the Monster World. I forget the term for all the mutations that they have. Anyway, he is able to jump to whatever timeline he wants, but he chose very specific timeline, and part of it was self-serving, and then he kind of grew. But this is that writing the history, right? So
Yeah.
As far as everyone around him was concerned, he was the Rick from that timeline, but they didn't know any better because they didn't know that Ricks could jump.
Yeah.
And stuff. So he just kind of made it up as he went along, and he was serving his own purpose. But the history that he crafted for everybody was the one that he developed, and then it starts to break down over time as he has to give up pieces of information and this is arguably that as we uncover more things, right? Whether it's archaeology, whether it's new stories coming out, like you just gave the example for Pakistan. Now, the stories that are coming out are 2 or 3 generations old.
Mm-hmm.
So how accurate are they?
Those generations are still alive, so they can be as accurate as their memories are.
So if they're being told by them.
Yes.
Some of the stories are being told by their children or their children's children.
Yep.
And so how much of that is being colored by a message that they're trying to present? I have no idea. I wasn't there. But that is a factor, just like you were saying. You got to consider the source, right? Well, even if it's the original source, how much of it do they actually remember?
Yeah.
How much of it have they suppressed?
That in particular, yes.
Don't want to remember, good or bad. I have such hate for what happened. I refuse to remember certain things. Or I have such sadness that I refuse to remember certain bad things because they're just too painful. I mean, it happens all the time. That's the way people deal with things. That's just part of the human psyche. So with all that. But that's bringing it back to Rick and Morty, so we can take care of number 3 there. and leave the audience of 3 wanting more. And hopefully get anyone who happens across this on YouTube and everywhere else to tune in later on and join the conversation by throwing down the equivalent of half a beer at a bar or a tavern, as the case may be.
Do me a solid and take out your phone and take a picture of the screen.
All right. Where's the picture? There it is.
And this is going to be the way we're going to do it every episode. Guest takes a picture of the screen. Read who's at the top of the screen.
In this case, it's easy because we haven't had a whole lot of chat there. It is Kai Thrall or Thrail. I don't know. It's one of those English or one of those Lord of the Rings Elvish names. So whoever Kai Thrall is,
get in touch with the bar wench. Give your mailing address over, and the mailing address will come to me. Tavern Stories will send a care package, and
what do they win?
What do they win?
No idea.
There's a couple of ideas that we've got, actually. One, as I'm handing this over, if you sign that, that is the topics and the stories.
The official. This will actually be worth something one day. Maybe.
So that's one thing that you're getting. The dice that we're using, in this case, it's being...
Wow. That's like $20 right there.
And you're never going to squint and see what dice those are, but every episode will be a new set of dice that we're using. That'll be in the package. There's some merch that's coming out soon, and if there's anything that sponsors are interested in sending over, then that'll also make it into the care package.
Very cool.
We have some more sponsors in mind coming up, so it could be a different care package all the time.
Hey, and if you're interested in sponsoring, what's the email? tavernstories.podcast@gmail.com. Is that right?
That's right.
There you go.
That's a way to get in touch, and let's talk about sponsoring an episode and getting you to the Discord.
Fantastic. And let's see some more folks next week on the chat. I promise it'll be better because it'll be someone other than me.
Yeah. So in the course of the coming week, and when I see you next, and when I see everybody else next, come back to the tavern with some good stories, and we'll roll some dice and tell some fictional stories, some personal stories, some stories that have already been told.
Cool.
And why that matters.
And they'll change each time. It'll be awesome. I didn't even get to the Team Sergeant Dave stories.
I mean, why deprive them?
Yeah, no, that's something you gotta wait for the bacon stories, and those of you who have heard those know what I'm talking about. So, yeah.
Anything else that you want to plug before you go?
Nope. Just hey, if you are in the market for a new house, no matter where you are, look up gkgroupva.com. Buying or selling or investing. We work in Northern Virginia, but we can refer anywhere in the United States, especially if you are military of any sort, an educator of any sort, first responder, doctor, anything like that. You qualify as a Homes for Heroes client, and we will, if you're not in Northern Virginia, we will get you hooked up with a Homes for Heroes agent to help you in your area. And that is the equivalent of about $700 for every $100,000 of sales price that you get back in the form of a hero reward check. So you've got the website there, www.gkgroupva.com.
And with that, I believe we have episode 1.
Cool. All right.
Cool. Come back with stories, guys. Talk to you another time in the tavern. Yes.